Xiao Chui, Wang Taichong is a native of Jiangsu and Zhejiang. When he was a child, he was bedbound during the day, and suddenly it was dark, with thunder and lightning, and an animal a little older than a cat jumped to bed and hid beside him, tossed around and wouldn't leave. The animal left after a short period of rain. That's when he realized it wasn't a cat. So scared he called out his brother from across the room. The chief inspector listened to him explain the origin of the incident and said with pleasure, "My brother will surely become a big official in the future. This is the fox who came to escape the thunderstorm." Later, he was a young man who had been a mentor from Jixian to the imperial court. Wang Taichong has a son named Yuan Feng, a full 16 years old, who can't tell the difference between male and female. Because of his stupidity, no one in the country would marry him his daughter. Mrs. Wang is very worried. One day, an old woman came to me with a girl who said she would marry the king as a wife. The girl was smiling, as beautiful as a fairy in heaven. Wang Taichong's family was delighted to ask the old woman's name, which she gave herself as Yu, and her daughter, Xiao Chui, was 16 years old. When discussing the offer, the old woman said, "The child is following me, and I can't eat enough food. Once living in this tall house, I'll be relieved that she has a maid to serve her and a mountain of seafood to eat. It's not like we're selling vegetables. Are we bargaining?" Mrs. Wang gave them a very happy and enthusiastic reception. The old woman asked her daughter to meet the Wang Taiking couple and said, "This is your in-laws. You must serve them well. I'm busy. I'll be back in 3 or 2 days. I'll be back in the future." Mrs. Wang often asks the servants to send the horses. The old woman said her house was not far from here, so she didn't have to bother. Miss Xiao did not appear to be grieving or attached either, searching for patterns in the small suitcases she brought with her to prepare for her work. Mrs. Wang was very generous to her and liked it. After a few days, the old lady did not come. When Mrs. Wang asked Chui where she lived, she just showed a goofy look and didn't know where she lived or how she would go. Mrs. Wang packed another yurt and married the couple. Relatives heard that Mr. Wang often found a daughter-in-law from a poor family, prompting a veiled ridicule. But I was so surprised to see her, and I've never talked about anything since. Kai is smart enough to see her in-laws' faces, and the old couple love her so much that she is afraid that Yuan Feng is stupid. Jade laughed, as if she didn't care. Only Xiao Chui loves to play too much. She often sews a piece of cloth into a ball, kicks and plays. She puts on her shoes. Once kicked, she walks dozens of steps away, Yuan Feng ran to collect it. Yuan Feng and her girlfriends run around, often sweating. One day, Mrs. Wang often passes by, and the ball comes halfway up the sky, and a shot hits her face. Little Chui and her girlfriend sneak off, and Yuan Feng runs over silly, so angry. He picked up a rock and threw it. He was hitting his son. Yuan Feng was crying on the floor. Mrs. Wang often returned to the room and told her what had happened, and she came to berate Chui. With her head down and a smile on her face, Miss Chui scratched her fingers across the edge of the bed. After Madame left, she made a scene again, smearing rouge powder on Yuan Feng's face and painting it all in all colors, like a figure. "Madam, I'm so angry. I'll call Kai to complain." Miss Xiao played with the straps on the table. Unafraid and silent, Madame was helpless, but she had to take the anger of her son and beat Yuan Feng to tears. And Chui changed her face and kneeled on the floor to beg for mercy. Madame dissipated and walked out with her stick. Shaokui helped him to the bedroom, dust off his clothes, wipe tears from his face with a handkerchief and feed him dates and millets. Yuan Feng stops crying and gets happy again. Xiao Chui closed the door, dressed Yuan Feng as Chuba King, dressed himself in garish clothes, waist length and dressed as Yuji, dancing with a relaxed pose. At times, Mr. Ding played persistently as a dessert king, plucked himself with a pheasant rhinestone and peepo in his arm, and filled the room with laughter. Day after day, always like this, Wang Taichang, because his son is stupid, cannot bear the heart to over-criticize Chui. Even if he occasionally hears, he has to pretend to be deaf and dumb. In the same alleyway as the Wangs, there is a Wang Jiajian, only a dozen people apart. But Wang Taichong and Wang Jiajian have always been at odds. At that time, during the triennial official examination, Wang made the Hunan platform for Wang Daochang, who was jealous of Wang Daochang, looking for the opportunity to make a secret calculation. Wang knows all too often he's in a hurry, but he can't think of a way to deal with it. One night, Wang often slept early. Xiao Chui put on her official clothes, pretended to be a minister of government, cut some white velvet to make a beard, and asked a woman to put on their green clothes to make a minister of government, sneaking out the horses from the horse shed and saying, "Go see Mr. Wang." At the gate of Wang Gejian, he whips his servant with a horse whip and says, "I want to see Wang Shiyu." Who wants to see what Wang Gejian? Turn the horse and go. On the doorstep, the concierge thought it was the official book and rushed to the upper room to report to the prince. Mrs. Wang often gets up to greet her daughter-in-law in a hurry, only to realize that she's making a big joke. Wang Tai, a white-faced woman, threw her sleeves and went back to her room. She told her wife, "We're being intervened and trying to fix our family." "That's good. Our daughter-in-law has started this ugly incident instead. Our family's disaster is coming to an end." Madame was so angry that she ran into Emerald's house, reprimanding and scolding. Jade's just, "Hey, silly laugh. No argument. Hit her. You can't stop it. You can stop her. You're homeless." The couple had a lot of regrets and didn't sleep well. At this time, Shang Shu, the official, had a fair voice, and he was dressed exactly like Chui that day. Therefore, Wang Gejian also thought that it was a real official book, and repeatedly sent people to Wang Taichang's door to ask for news. In the middle of the night, I haven't seen the official Shang Shu out yet, and he suspects that the official Shang Shu and the Wang Taichang are discussing some secret matter. The next morning, the king asked Wang Taichang, "Did you visit him at the palace last night?" Mrs. Wang often thought he was sarcastic and flabbergasted, only whispering to yes. The king became more suspicious of Jian, and he never dared to be the king again, but he was very close to him. Mrs. Wang often reveals her feelings and is secretly happy, but she still privately advises Chui not to make any more nonsense after exhorting her, and Jade smiled and agreed to come down. A year later, the prime minister was fired. It happened that someone had written a private letter to Wang Taichang, which was sent to Wang's home by mistake. When Wang gave Jian Daxi, he asked a person who had frequent contacts with the prince to borrow 12,000 silver from him for blackmail. Mr. Wang refused. Wang Gejian came to the house to talk. Mrs. Wang is so busy looking for official clothes that she can't find them. Keisuke waited for a while, thinking that Wang Tai was always posing, deliberately snubbing and furiously about to leave. And Yuan Feng was suddenly crowned in an emperor's dragon robe and was pushed out of the door by his female son. Wang gave advice a jump, made a false smile, soothed the boy, took off his crown and gave it to the conformist. By the time Mr. Wang got out, the guests had already left. Wang often found out the reason, immediately dazed. His face looked like dirt, and he cried, "What a scourge! Breaking into this monstrous calamity, and seeing our whole family being knocked down. We will be knocked down." He said he and his wife are going to beat Sui with sticks. Kai already knew. Shut the door, let them call you names, and ignore them. Mrs. Wang often sees this situation, adding fuel to the fire, and picking up an axe to cleave the door. At this time, Chui smiled at the door and urged his father-in-law to say, "Don't be angry with your father. If I'm around, I will take all kinds of punishments, and I will never implicate your second wife. Dad's going to choke me. Is this about killing people?" Mrs. Wang always listened to reason, and that's why she threw the axe down. The king returned to his advice, and he certainly played the emperor, revealing that the king was always rebellious, as evidenced by the dragon robes and the crown. The emperor opened the examination in surprise, and it turned out that the crown was made up of straws from high beams, and the dragon robe was a worn yellow cloth baggage. The emperor got angry and blamed the king for framing the good guys. The emperor called Yuan Feng again. He turned out to be an idiot. The emperor laughed. "Can such a fool be an emperor? I'll leave it to the Department of Justice." Wang Gejian also accused Wang Taichang of having a demon in his family. The judicial officials detained the Wang family's mistress for interrogation, and everyone said, "What kind of bogeyman? Just a crazy daughter-in-law and a demented son." That's what neighbors say. The case was only concluded, and the king was sentenced to file a false accusation against the emperor and serve in Yunnan. From then on, Wang often thought that Xiaokui was unusual, and because her mother couldn't return, she suspected that her daughter-in-law was a fairy. Let Mrs. Wang ask. Jade just laughed. She said something. "I'm the daughter of the Jade Emperor. Don't you know that yet?" Miss Chui said, covering her mouth and laughing. Soon after, Wang Taichung was promoted again. By then he was in his 50s, often fretting about not having grandchildren. It's been 3 years since Jade passed by, and she sleeps in separate beds with her son every night. She sent someone to remove the son's bed and told him to sleep with Jade. After a few days, the man sued his wife. "Why didn't you return the bed when it was moved? Jade put her feet on my stomach every night, and I couldn't breathe. I pinched people's thighs." The women laughed with their mouths covered, and the wife threw him out with a drink. One day, Chui took a bath in her room. Yuan Feng saw her and was going to take a bath with her. Kai laughed and stopped him, told him to wait. After taking a shower, Chui pours hot water into the urn, then undresses the boy and holds him under urn. The boy was so sultry he screamed to come out. Chui wouldn't listen and covered him up with a quilt. After a while, the sound stopped, opened and died. Kai laughed without panic, slowly lifted the boy out of bed, dried him and covered his bed with two quilts. She ran in tears when she heard her son drowning in the shower, yelling, "Crazy girl! How did you kill my son?" Miss Choi smiled and said, "Such a dumb son. It's better if you don't have one." Madam was even more mad when she heard the jop and hit her head against Xiao Chui. The girls kept pulling the lady away. A woman came to report, "Son, get up." Madam held back tears and stroked Yuan Feng, wheezing and sweating and soaking the quilt. After a meal, the sweat is gone, and Yuan Feng opens his eyes and looks around. The housekeeper, as if he didn't know each other at all, said, looking back, "It's like a dream." "What's going on?" Madam heard this, as if not from a fool, and thought it strange, leading him to meet Wang Taichung. "It's too often. It's not stupid." The family was so happy. It was a real treat. The old couple secretly told the servants to lift the bed back, put it in place and lay out the bedding. Check again the next day, the bedding is still there. Since then, Yuan Feng's dementia has not recurred, and the couple are in perfect harmony, moving in and out of the city, and they are inseparable. More than a year later, Mrs. Wang was often impeached, removed from office and punished by the Kidian party. Wang Taichung's family has a jade bottle from Guangxi province, worth thousands of dollars, ready to bribe the official. Jade loved the vase and used to play with it. One at a time, I fell to the ground, and I smashed it. She was so ashamed she was too busy telling her in-laws. The two of us are worried about losing the official position when the jade bottle is broken. We are delighted and chastised Xiao Chui. Chui leaves the door furiously and says to Yuan Feng, "I have kept more than one vase in your house for a few years. How can I be so embarrassed? To be honest with you, I'm not just any woman, but because my mother was protected by your father when she was struck by lightning. And because we've been together for 5 years. That's why I came to your house, one to repay her debt, and the other to give up. I don't know how much abuse I've been subjected to in your house, but I can't count. The reason I didn't leave is that we haven't had a relationship for 5 years. Can I stay now?" In a nutshell, Chui walked out in a rage. Yuan Feng chased the door and was nowhere to be found. Mr. Wang often felt he had gone too far, but regretted that it was too late. Yuan Feng entered the room and saw Xiaokui's used fat powder and jewelry, saw the object and homesick, and couldn't help crying. "I don't eat during the day, don't sleep at night, and lose weight every day." Wang was anxious and wanted to remarry him so as to relieve his grief. However, Yuan Feng was still not happy. Instead, he found a famous painter and drew a portrait of Xiao Chui, who offered prayers every day. That's almost 2 years past. One day, Yuan Feng returned from a trip by accident. It was late, and the moon was clear. There's a garden outside his house. He rode past the wall, heard a laugh in the wall, then stopped and told Mavra to stop the horse. He stood on the saddle and looked in from the wall. He saw two girls playing in the garden, because the moon was clouded by clouds, hazy and unclear. All I heard was a girl in a green dress who said, "Damn girl, get rid of you." The girl in the red dress said, "This is my garden. If you kick me, who the hell should I kick? I'm not shy, I'm not a daughter-in-law. I've been put out and I'm afraid I'm in your garden," she says. The red girl said, "It's always better than you." The old girl with no lord, Yuan Feng, who sounded like Xiao Chui, was busy shouting at her. As she walked, the green girl said, "I'm not arguing with you for a while. Here comes your man." The red lady came over, and it was Chui. Yuan Feng was overjoyed. Chui asked him to climb up the wall and pick him up, saying, "If you haven't seen him for 2 years, you're so thin that you only have a skeleton left." Yuan Feng held her hand and burst into tears, detailing her thoughts. Chui said, "I know, but I'm too ashamed to enter your house again. I didn't think I'd run into you, so I can't escape." Yuan Feng asked her to come back with him, but Sui refused. She asked her to stay in the garden, and she said yes. Yuan Feng sent his servant home to greet his wife. Madame came in a car as she listened, startled and delighted. Enter the garden, and Jade greets him on his knees. Madame, clutching Kai's arm, weeping and genuinely examining her past wrongs, could not have forgiven herself. And he said, "If you don't hate me in your heart, please come back with me and give me solace in my old age." Miss Chui pushed hard, refusing to agree. "Madam, because the garden is so desolate, she plans to send more servants, other people. I didn't want to see them. Just the two girls," Chui said. "It's been a long time. I trust them. Let them come. Just take care of the gate and send an old servant. No one else needs it." Madame did what Chui said, and the outsider said Yuan Feng was sick in the garden. They were given food and daily supplies every day. Xiao Qisheng persuaded Yuan Feng to marry another person. After more than a year, Jade's face and voice have changed. Take the picture out. It's a two-man decision. Yuan Feng is very strange. Xiao Chui said, "Do you see me as beautiful as ever?" Yuan Feng said, "Today you are beautiful, but not the same as before." Xiao Chui said, "Are you saying I'm old?" Yuan Feng said, "You are still in your 20s. How can you be old?" Little Chui smiled and burned the portrait, and Yuan Feng was going to get it, which had turned to ashes. One day, Xiao Chui told Yuan Feng, "My father-in-law said that I will never have a child until my death. Now both parents are old, and you are alone and have no brothers. I will not bear children, so I fear that I will affect your grandchildren. You're still married to another wife, and you can serve your wife sooner or later. There's nothing inconvenient about you running around on both sides." Yuan Feng said yes, and asked Zhang Taishi to marry him. As the reception approached, Chui made new clothes, shoes and socks for the new woman and sent them to Zhang's house. The bride comes in, her face.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.